According to Beijing, anti-China forces are manipulating the PM as Xi Jinping attempts to reset relations between Australia and China. Now, we need to ask, is there any merit in Beijing's claims, and is Albo being manipulated? Joining us today to discuss this, we've got Brian Smith, Shadow Minister for Planning in Victoria. We've got Mario Beeks, Security Consultant and author of Blood and Soil. We've got John Heron, Solicitor and Victims Advocate. And we've got Ian Cook, Director of I Cook Foods and infamous for the Sludgate scandal. Welcome, team.
Good
Morning.
Now, Albo's been backed into a corner here with China coming out with its list of demands where Australia must treat China as a partner rather than a rival, and then seek common ground and reserve differences. In a veiled swipe at Australia's relationship with the United States, China has also said that Canberra needed to refrain from targeting any other nation or being controlled by any third party. And it also said that Australia must build a positive and pragmatic public and social support for China's goals. Is there any way that we can read anything into this other than put your fists up or bow down?
Well, yes, actually, if people are familiar with China, what is put out here in black and white is not really the overall intent. They just don't work in that manner. There's behind the scenes and behind the scenes. My view when I saw it was actually a positive hand out to try and reset the relationship, because probably some heads in Beijing, I'm probably going out on a limb here, at the end of the day that they're dependent on Australia, so they probably want to ratchet down, and they're only using Albo because he's a new kid on the block. Chinese are very deft at working out who's a friend and who isn't. And as far as Albo goes, like what I said last week, that it's deer in headlight stuff. So they know that him and Wong are completely inexperienced on the stage, and they can actually put over them what they want now. That's where that's coming from.
It puts him in a fairly awkward space, though. If he seemed to acquiesce to China's demands, it would hurt him, could hurt him domestically, couldn't it?
Well, I think just using the language, whether it's the media or whether it's the actual language, I'm not really sure, but to list any considerations that the Australian government should make as demands from China, that's a red rag to a bull to most Australians. I'm not sure how the Prime Minister's looking at it, but for Australians to read in the paper that China are making demands of us, that's not something that's going to go down well with the Australian public.
Can I add something on this? You know, we had the last 2.5 decades of very big growth, between China and Australia. And one of the articles I read in the books as well, and I made a comments on that one, that China was very clear in 1999 when they released the plane, which is based on the book Three-Pronged Warfare, and it's hybrid warfare. And I can see that, that the Chinese actually playing by that book, Three-Pronged Warfare, against Australia. And is the Prime Minister manipulated? That's hardly to confirm, or or say it's true or not. But the fact it is the Chinese, they're pushing this narrative for last couple of years now against Australia. It's going to be difficult to come out of those clutches of China.
China still has some fairly harsh tariffs on Australian products. I think we've got lobster, beef, cotton, and timber exports. They've also blocked coal and copper exports. Could China have gone about it differently and made a peace offering rather than a demand, and been prepared to offer some of this up to get the ball rolling?
No, it doesn't work like that in China. If you've lived and worked in China, it's about losing face. So it's not that we'll give in to Australia. So we're a bit perplexed. We say, why do they cut their nose to spite their face? That's very much a cultural thing, and that's played out in their government. So it's very heavy-handed. That's the way they operate, but they can maneuver behind the scenes. But I'm a believer of what happened the last few years with the federal government only inflamed the situation. So, for example, aside from the rhetoric coming from the previous federal government, there's all that activity from the Australian military in the South China Sea, I believe, is completely unnecessary. It's absolutely provocative to the Chinese. There's no reason for us to be flying aircraft and warships through the South China Sea. And if there's one thing that does that, that angers China, it's our actions. So if anything, the behind the scenes are absolutely impossible previously. And a few weeks before the election, we saw Dutton slam China for a spy ship cruising around international waters, these types of things here. So they're not geared to like bite the bullet and put that hand out. It's a bit of a slow process, but I think it's possibly going in the right direction now.
Shall we get Ian sorted out? Ian, you're sideways to everyone at the moment.
I don't know what this thing is doing.
There you go. So what should be Albo's next move? Clearly China are upset by Australia pushing its interests in the South Pacific at the moment, trying to more or less put the brakes on China. How do we go about that without further inflaming things and still holding our sovereignty and our interests in the area?
Well, look, if again, talking about living in these areas in the Pacific, and particularly living in the Solomon Islands, it's only about who can pay more. We've been through this before, where the actual person with cash floating around the Pacific before was Taiwan. People wouldn't be really aware of that. And the Solomons and other countries gave political recognition to Taiwan. So that's where China came out with money to snuff that out. It's not about money, like the amount of money that they fork out is nothing. Right? Many of the nations in the Pacific are easily bribed. I'll reflect you back to Papua New Guinea and mercenaries and executive outcomes 20 odd years ago in Bougainville. So these things can occur. It's who has the biggest checkbook. So in the Solomons recently, China's has popped up. They've actually banned in the last few days Australian aid workers going to the Solomons. When I was trying to get to the Solomons, I couldn't get my spouse in the Solomons because of a spat on that issue, and they stopped issuing visas. Australia just doesn't hand out cash like that. So they're always going to be at a disadvantage. It's that simple. So China snuffs Taiwan out of the South Pacific. That's their main aim. Their main aim's not, I don't think, is to build big airfields and cruise over Brisbane. The point number one is to get Taiwan completely out of the area. And then Australia's like inexperience in action. It's actually opened up the door for more of them.
I agree with you. John. You know, like you're absolutely spot on that one. Who has a bigger checkbook is going to win this race, because, you know, my understanding, Australia has a decades and decades, you know, relationships with all these island nations, and suddenly Chinese get a, you know, upper hand. And when you put this in context, what's happening around the globe and everything else, you're absolutely right. It's a checkbook, and it's nothing to do with, you know, who we like it more, we don't like it more. But truth it is, Australia has a presence on those islands for many, many years. And it's interesting enough that this is happening right now. So it is about money. It is about money, nothing else.
Are we out of our depth? As we might be a regional power, but we're still just a middle power as far as a nation goes. Are we out of our depth, or are we stuck in the middle of America, trying to keep America on side and not upset China, who's our largest trading partner? Because I know if I was a primary producer, a barley producer, or any of those that were dependent on China, a wine producer, I don't know how much faith I would have in America, who does have tariffs on some of our farm products going into there. Where will Albo find support in that area?
Well, it's more than just keeping America on side. We're allies of America through, you know, a bunch of different treaties and agreements and things. So it's not a matter of just acquiescing to America. We've actually got relationships with them that we have to maintain. But we also, I mean, I take on board what you're saying about China being a trading partner, and I know of a number of importers who are now looking to source their product from different areas so that they can at least diversify the way they're getting their materials. I think we should stand up to China when we feel that we're being abused by them. That's not to say we shouldn't have as cordial diplomatic relations as we possibly can. Of course, we should. But as far as being, at America's beck and call or anything, I mean, we've got partnerships and agreements and treaties and alliances with them, and that's what we need to maintain. I mean, we've sheltered under the US protections for many, many years, and we should continue that. With the ANZUS treaty, we know that anyone ever comes near us as far as attacking us, US steps in immediately, and I don't think that's something we should ever take lightly or dismiss, because it's an important part of our defence approach.
I think excuse me, I think the other bit that I'd probably support you on, in that way, is that it's not just about the fact that America is, our big brother, or they're there to help us in times of conflict. I think you have to look at the countries. I mean, America is the largest, freest democracy in the world, and you can argue all day about the left and the right and the rights and the wrongs. It is still a much safer, a much better place to end up and culturally than being born in China. In China, there are the haves and the have-nots. They have a terrible record on human rights. So I think what's happening is you're looking at the cultural side of it, and then the economic side of it. And I agree with you. I mean, we traded. We used to buy 20 tons of fruit every year out of China. And we did it because the local councils wouldn't pay the price of Australian canned fruit. So, yeah, it's like, yes, as you say, we have to be cordial. We have to get on with them. We should trade with them. But we don't have to agree that that culturally the way they handle their population is what we would want here in Australia.
Yeah, look, there's a lot to respond to that. I think if we just look at the current situation from what Ryan said, so when the current situation with China kicked off with just a mere question over where did COVID come from, just a quick refresher, and that just triggered a spiral in the relationship between the two countries. Now, previously, just again, a refresher, China is not wanting Howard to meet with the Dalai Lama and all the other human rights abuses, and there's plenty of them. When I was there, it was rumored they were executed 20,000 Falun Gong and harvested their organs. That's the sort of thing. China is quite happy of our relationship at that time, where we just turned a blind eye and just took the money. Are we any different from the Pacific nations? No. But a little bit into Chinese insight again. So as Ryan said, that we found other markets for a lot of their boycotts, right? So the Chinese didn't expect that. But they're not the sort of, it doesn't work like that in China. They're not going to sit around a table and go, ooh, that didn't work. I think we should change shift. The culture doesn't work like that there. It's just, it's a one-way traffic, right? It's, geez, that didn't work. Let's just do something more, right? So again, that's why it just spirals out of control. So that sort of, we can mess around with the US in front of China's doorstep, but still trade with them. That's blatantly obvious. That's not going to work anymore. So we have to rethink that. There's a bit of a tricky diplomacy, and China had, for those 4 points that they offered, I don't think they were that bad, but and it's not, that's for the public, and that's for the Chinese public. That's for the 1.2 billion people in China. It's not for the 25 million in Australia. Right? If you're in China, Australia means nothing except coming out and seeing some penguins and going to the beach. Right? The amount of money that, if we seriously think China's dependent on us, we're absolutely fooling ourselves. They don't care. Right? But and for the sake of not losing face, they would hammer us even further. So I think I'll get back to the point. I think this may be an opportunity, maybe, to try and set us back on track. I
don't think the 4 points were that bad either. And what I've learned from my time going to COAG meetings and the like when I was in government was that those communiques are very, very carefully worded. You argue for hours over, a phrase here or there. But so it was very clearly, as you say, the right language for the Chinese population. It was completely the wrong language for the Australian population. And that's, as I said at the beginning, that's where Australians get their backup. If they think that their prime minister's getting run over by a government that wants to issue demands to us as a sovereign nation, then that's not going to go down very well. But it's clear that the Chinese and it's clear the Chinese put that language in on purpose, but it's also clear that Albanese and his diplomatic bureaucrats didn't vet it very well.
Well, we need to ask ourselves what Australia wants. The Prime Minister government, that we want to back to being good relation with China and extend our economics and the trades and all of this. Are we gonna do everything was possible to rekindle that relationship? And as John says, it's a tricky diplomacy, and it's not something it's gonna come overnight. And the last couple of years, that relationship between China and Australia deteriorated so badly. But I agree with you, John, what John says. China doesn't care for Australia. Like last 2 years, and we saw what's happening, with logistics, with the shippings and everything else. Everything is stuck in Shanghai and Hong Kong at this stage, and all these routes come to the China. So they don't care for the Australia that much, about pigments and beaches, but they have the different trade partners. And that situation in Ukraine right now, we can see. So we can argue about that one, but don't forget, almost $60 billion US now just give to the weapons to the Ukraine, and every weapon you send somewhere else, your own integrity and your own security is in question. So while we're talking about all this, China and Russia, they're building their relationship, and we can see to the East Asia how this is extending to the China actually, and that's a very, very, very dangerous waters what we're heading into. Either we want trade and economy, or we're going to hold our posture and be next to the US.
Does the old adage, you don't go to war with people you do business with, still hold?
Well, there used to be a thing called Pig Iron Bob about Bob Menzies, just to refresh some old memories there with Japan. Look, China and Russia, okay, they have no friends. They have no allies, no alliances. Maybe Russia has Belarus. So China doesn't have any friends as well. They've got each other, but it's not exactly a good bed relationship there. Whereas, as Ryan said, we've got alliances with the world's #1 superpower. So I think my view there again would be to put that in the back pocket and tone down. But again, if you want to do peace with China, the main thing there is you're not going to be criticising what's happening in human rights there. You're going to be turning a blind eye to that. And whether the Albanese government and his cohorts and Teals and all the others can do that, I doubt that. So that may be where it comes apart.
So
it's always
go on, Ian, sorry.
I was going to say that's always going to be the sticking point. It's it's a case of selling your morals, and we can all be moralistic and stand on our soapbox and tell everybody what we think, and then someone opens their checkbook and you say, oh well, we can change that.
Yeah. What about Andrews with his buying into the Belt and Road deal, and Morrison coming over the top and putting a kibosh on that? Do you think that could be reversed under Albanese?
I think.
Oh, sorry.
I think that would be very dangerous for Albanese politically, but I also think Andrews doing that deal really wasn't in Australia's best interest. Going into debt and substantial debt with China, that really is a big problem. And it harks back to what you say. The checkbook's open, the morals are chucked out the window. The 1 minute, and as soon as you accept all that money, then you have to accept that whatever they do culturally within their country, well, that's okay now. So if they do, murder a particular minority, et cetera, you wouldn't have any ground to stand up and say anything because you've already accepted, the gold from the devil.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, look, it's possible that Albanese could do it. I think it would be a terrible look. I mean, Victorians would go mad about it, that's for sure. But you got to remember when Andrews entered that agreement, it was never about what was good for Victorians or Australians more broadly. It was just about making sure that he was going to get a political outcome from it. And that's how he operates on a whole range of different things. It doesn't really care about the broader ramifications. It's just how it benefits him.
Yeah, probably. And as you can see, I'll be frank about this. It's Andrew swanning around Tiananmen Square and a few photo opportunities. Look, for a guy that's never had a job, he wouldn't have realised the ramifications of it. His enablers around him wouldn't have said, oh, gee, not a good idea, because they'd be gone in 2 minutes. That's the way he operates. So no, he wouldn't have got any, shall we say, fearless and frank advice from anyone. And then he swanned around with that famous photo of holding a mobile phone in Tiananmen Square. But the ramifications of that deal were far-reaching. And it left a bad taste in China's mouth, because how that amplifies is, let's say, around Africa and parts of Asia, Pakistan, where they're doing Belt and Road deals that are really meaningful. They could be in a meeting with the Chinese and go, oh, look, the Victorians ripped it up. That's not good. So again, that's where it comes back to China. It's like, they don't care about Victoria, but the optics of that are really bad. And it was a bad thought out deal. And then the federal government had to unravel that as well. So again, these Labor Party people and the deer in headlights, you end up paying for that for years to come.
Yeah, but that was his winning ticket, for the next elections. Look at what they did, creating new jobs, new infrastructure, and everything else. I agree with you, John. For the guy who never held a job in his life, and that picture was, it's great. It's a great picture from Tiananmen Square.
Yeah, especially too, we've seen many companies that have been awarded contracts by the Andrews government have actually gone bankrupt as well. And, we can look at the Western Road upgrade. It's failing already. The millions of dollars of repairs that were given to a company that had never done a job as big as that went under, owing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the contractors. And now Andrews has sort of gone, well, mate, that's between you guys. Pretty harmful. So what's the next step for Australia with China? How would you approach it, Ryan?
Well, any partnership should have benefits for both parties, and I think that's what we've got to aim for. I think if the government is seen by the Australian people as being subservient to China, then the population's going to push back on that. But if we can have a partnership where we can get back to some normality with regards to trade, I think you can still have those. I mean, diplomacy is all about being able to move forward, even if it's incremental. So I guess, we keep the trade relationship. We can still talk about the human rights issues with them while we're maintaining that communication. Not that I think that China are going to be falling over themselves to enact what Australia thinks is the right way to go with regards to human rights. But a good relationship is better. I think that when Dutton called out on, I think it was Anzac Day, that we should prepare for war, that was a massive overreach. And I know it frightened a lot of Chinese residents here in my electorate and around my electorate. That really sent them into a really concerned state. And the results in metropolitan Melbourne seats that had high Chinese community was there for all to see, that we really, in the areas of Chisholm and Menzies and around those areas. So that sort of rhetoric is not something that local Chinese want to hear, and probably broadly it's not something that Australians want, Australian-born want to hear either. But I think in a nutshell, let's get the partnership to some area of normality. Let's not be subservient, and let's maintain the relationships with our allies that we've always had, because that's really been the umbrella of protection that we've enjoyed for many decades.
Very well
Yeah,
said, John.
Mostly agree, but as you can hear me pushing this non-aligned type line, I would ratchet down the military activity around the South China Sea, but behind the scenes, I would say to the Chinese, you have to reciprocate by slowly just unwinding a lot of these trade barriers that you've got. And the problem with Australians in Australia is that we've been burnt once. So we're in our culture, it's not as if you're going to go out and do it again and again and again. So that China, you've got to allow them to not lose face. So basically ratchet down a few things, open up trade barriers. But again, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to turn a blind eye to the atrocities, and there's plenty of them. It's just the way that they would operate. In China, if you live and work there, like the general population doesn't really care about the regime. They just get along with making money and going out and having a good time. It's only if you come into conflict with the regime, then you're in trouble, right? So what people do there is avoid any type of contact with the regime whatsoever. Mind you, you know, like, again, you know, if you bump into the security forces or whatnot, it's not necessarily a big deal over there. But unless you're powerful and they want to bribe out of you, then that's a different thing. But that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, I agree with you, John and Ryan. You know, there's nothing wrong to, you know, like we have alliances. Australia has alliances for decades, you know what I mean? And that's nothing new for the China. And we should build and cherish our relationship with our allies. But on the other hand, you know, I think that Australia should do diplomacy and wind some negotiations, you know, how to trade actually continue between the China and Australia, because it's in Australian national interest that the economy actually comes into the better shape. But that doesn't necessarily mean, as John says, we should, you know, bow to the Chinese, you know what I mean, and you know, do this again to us over and again. So
yeah. What about you, Ian?
I was just listening to what John said about people in China just wanting to get on with business and make money and, you know, live a good life and bring up their families and try and avoid the regime as best they can. Made me think of my relationship with the Labor government in Victoria.
Yeah.
So, yeah, doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about the situation at the moment, there's conversation, and diplomacy can't happen without that conversation. Hopefully, there'll be a mutual good faith thing, like maybe a trade mission where they'll be welcomed in to see what common ground we can find. But again, as John has rightfully pointed out, it may mean, you know, remaining quiet on the things that, you know, possibly shouldn't be remain silent on. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for a fascinating conversation, and we'll adjourn and meet back next week.
Thanks very much.
See you later, Michael.
thank you, guys.
See you
Thank
later.
you.